In a quiet park, a little girl points at a lonely black boy and cries out, "Daddy, that's my brother." Her father, wealthy, white, and successful, freezes. The boy's face mirrors his own. In that instant, a buried past, a hidden child, and a mother wronged all come crashing back. What happens next will shake everything he thought he stood for. This heartwarming story will make you question where loyalty ends and love begins. So, where in the world are you watching from? And is it morning, afternoon, or night where you are right now? On a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where the world feels a little softer and the light settles gently on everything it touches, Charles Holmes walked hand in hand with his 5-year-old daughter Jolie through the winding trails of Lincoln Park. The leaves on the trees were just starting to change golden along the edges, catching hints of the fall to come. It was the sort of morning that made you feel like life was manageable again, quiet still, even kind. Charles, a man nearing 50, moved with the reserved confidence of someone used to being in control. His tailored blazer and well-shined shoes stood out in the casual air of the park, but nothing about him seemed performative. He wasn't a man who needed to prove anything. Not anymore. These walks were for Jolie. They were his promise to her, and in some unspoken way, to the woman who had once stood between them, Madeline, his late wife. She'd been gone for 2 years now. Jolie remembered her in flashes. Charles remembered her in waves. Jolie, in contrast, carried herself like the world was hers to discover. Her curls bounced as she skipped ahead in pink sneakers, a stuffed giraffe tucked under one arm, her other hand firmly holding her father's. She talked nearly the entire time, switching from the book they had read the night before to the squirrel she spotted darting across the path to whether dogs could eat grapes. Charles listened with a patience that surprised even himself. He wasn't always this way. Work used to take more of him, but after losing Madeline, he had decided no. He had sworn he would never miss another moment. He didn't have to. They were nearing the open plaza by the fountain when Jolie suddenly stopped. Her grip on Charles's hand tightened, and her voice dropped into a kind of wonder. "Daddy." "That's my brother," she said, pointing with her free hand. Charles turned, following her gaze, expecting to see someone familiar from daycare, maybe a neighbor. But the boy, sitting alone on the edge of the fountain, wasn't anyone Charles had seen before. He was maybe 8 or 9 years old, African-American, skinny, but upright, his back straight, as if he'd taught himself to take up as little space as possible, while still keeping his pride. He had a small, worn box in his lap and was tracing his fingers along the corners, like he was trying to memorize them. Charles raised an eyebrow. "What did you say?" Jolie didn't look away from the boy. "That's my brother," she repeated calmly, like it was a fact. "He looks like me. And he looks like you." Charles squinted, something in her voice catching his breath. He looked again, this time with focus. The boy's eyes were strikingly blue. Not pale, not icy, but deep, steady, almost familiar. His cheekbones and jawline held a structure that nudged at something inside Charles's memory, and for a moment, he felt his throat tighten. He brushed the feeling off. Coincidences happened. The world was full of people who looked like other people. Jolie tugged at his arm. "Can we go talk to him?" Charles hesitated. A strange, guilty curiosity flickered inside him. He should say no. He didn't know the boy. He didn't know his situation. But something about that look in Jolie's eyes, earnest, trusting, unshakable, softened his resistance. He nodded. "Okay." Just for a minute, they walked slowly across the plaza. The boy noticed them approaching, but didn't move. His hand stopped moving around the box. His posture remained still, unreadable. Charles crouched a few feet away and spoke gently, like he might spook a bird. "Hey there," he said, his voice calm. "Mind if we say hi?" The boy shrugged, barely moving. Jolie, without hesitation, plopped down, cross-legged next to him, smiling wide. "Hi, I'm Jolie. That's my daddy. What's your name?" The boy looked at her, then at Charles, then back to the box. Finally, he answered barely above a whisper. "Baron." "Baron," Charles repeated. "Nice to meet you." Baron didn't respond. Jolie leaned in a little. "What's in the box?" Baron clutched it tighter. "Just stuff," he said. Charles noticed how thin his jacket was, how his sneakers looked like they were a size too small, the soles beginning to separate. He also noticed how calm the boy seemed. Not scared, not friendly. Just still. Like someone who had learned to keep his distance, not because he wanted to, but because experience had taught him that was safer. "Are you here with someone?" Charles asked. "Your parents?" Baron hesitated. "My mom's name is Elisha. She's sick." "Is there someone we can call?" Charles offered, trying to keep his voice neutral, gentle. "A number or address?" Barron shook his head slowly. "She said not to talk to strangers." Jolie tilted her head. "We're not strangers if we're family," she said simply. Barron gave her a look that was part amusement, part disbelief. "We're not family." "Yes, we are," Jolie said, completely certain. "I can feel it." Charles glanced at her, his heart catching again. It wasn't just what she said, it was the ease with which she said it. No hesitation, no doubt. She didn't care about skin color or age or how improbable it was. She just felt it. And somehow, looking at Baron Charles couldn't bring himself to dismiss her. There was something too familiar in the boy's features, something that stirred a memory. He searched his mind trying to place it. Could it be? No. That was almost a decade ago. A mistake. A moment. Long buried. A name it hurt to recall. "Are you hungry?" Jolie asked Baron. He shrugged again, but his eyes lingered a second too long on the sandwich bag in Charles's hand. Jolie noticed. She turned to her father. "Can he have mine?" Charles opened the bag and handed it over without a word. Baron took it slowly, as if unsure it was real, then unwrapped it with care. He ate quietly, methodically, chewing slowly like someone used to making food last. Jolie sat beside him, talking now about squirrels and school, and how she named her giraffe Buttons because of his eyes. Baron listened. He didn't say much, but his posture loosened just slightly. He looked less alone. Charles stepped back a few paces, giving them space. His mind was spinning, heart unsettled. There was no way. It had been a single night years ago. No follow-up, no explanation. He had moved on. He had gotten married, had Jolie, lived his life. But now this boy with eyes like his face, like his name, unfamiliar but presence undeniable, was sitting beside his daughter, eating her sandwich, looking like someone who had belonged there all along. He didn't want to believe it. He wasn't ready to believe it, but he couldn't look away. Jolie laughed at something Baron said, his first real response. It was quiet, almost shy, but it made her giggle. Charles watched them, something pulling tight inside his chest. He didn't know it yet, but something irreversible had just begun. The office was quiet, unusually so. The kind of stillness that makes you aware of your own footsteps, your own breath. Charles Holmes arrived just after sunrise, earlier than usual, carrying with him a weight he hadn't been able to set down since the moment Jolie pointed across the park and said the words that had split open something he thought was sealed tight. "That's my brother." He had heard it, dismissed it, then couldn't stop thinking about it. It wasn't the kind of sentence a child Jolie's age made up for fun. She had said it with certainty, with the kind of instinct that came from somewhere deeper than logic. He hadn't slept well. The boy Baron was still in his head, that face, those eyes. It wasn't just imagination. It wasn't just a passing resemblance. It was something else. Charles set his coffee down on the edge of his desk without tasting it. The computer screen glowed softly as he logged in, the familiar company logo blinking at him before settling. His hand moved to the mouse, hesitating just a moment before he opened the employee archives. The system had changed over the years, but he still had access to records going back more than a decade. He clicked into the search bar and stared at it, unsure exactly what he was looking for, until the name came to him, quiet but clear. Alicia. He typed it in. Alicia Lawrence. The search results came up faster than expected. Only one profile matched. Alicia A. Lawrence. Hired 11 years ago. Terminated just over 9 years ago. He clicked into the file. There was a headshot. It was grainy, a standard ID photo, but unmistakable. Her eyes looked the same as he remembered, sharp, focused, but weary in a way that went beyond long hours at a desk. Her personnel notes were thin. Job title, Financial Compliance Analyst. Performance satisfactory. Final note, terminated due to administrative oversight failure. No details, no room for nuance. Just a line. Charles leaned back slightly, jaw tight. He barely remembered the case. There had been some kind of audit, a discrepancy in quarterly filings. The legal team had advised swift action. Public trust was shaky back then. It was right before the merger. They needed to be spotless. Someone had to take the fall. And Alicia, quiet, efficient, not high on the ladder, was the easiest name to cross off. He had signed the termination himself. The thought made his stomach turn. He dug further and found an old email in his archived inbox. Subject line, final note. It was from Alicia, sent the day of her termination. Charles clicked it open. Mr. Holmes, I respect your decision and understand that sometimes outcomes are determined by more than truth. I just want to say I did the job I was hired to do. I stood by the numbers. I didn't lie. If someone had asked me, I would have told them everything. But no one did. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity. I hope your company continues to grow and lead with integrity. Elijah A. Lawrence. There was no bitterness in her words, no accusation, but the dignity in that email felt louder than anything else Charles had read in years. And that final line, it stung. I hope your company continues to grow and lead with integrity. He had never replied to her, not even a thank you. At the time, it hadn't felt necessary. She was just one of many. Now he felt ashamed for how easily he had looked away. The question in his mind was no longer vague. It was sharp. Was Barron her son Charles opened a public records directory and began looking into background data, no hacks, just what anyone could search with enough motivation. He entered her full name, current location filters, a few dead addresses, and then a match. A South End apartment building. Modest, run down. He pulled up the associated household information. Her name was listed as tenant, and just under it in the same unit was another name, Barron Lawrence, age 9, relation son. He stared at the screen. There it was. No maybe, no speculation. Barron was Alicia's son. The same woman he had helped fire without a hearing, without a conversation, without a single word of real human concern, now had a child living with her in a part of town he didn't drive through anymore, and that child might very well be his. He scrolled further. There was no father listed on Barron's public school registration. Emergency contact, Elijah Lawrence only. The boy's birth certificate wasn't available digitally. Some older records still required in-person request, but the pieces had aligned enough to make one thing clear: the timeline fit. The circumstances fit. The resemblance. That wasn't coincidence anymore. Charles leaned back again, his spine stiff, his jaw clenched tighter than before. This wasn't just guilt. This was failure. Failure to notice, failure to act, failure to care enough when it might have changed everything. He remembered something else now, a flash from almost 10 years ago, a short period of time when Alicia had started coming to meetings early, offering insights that went beyond her role, speaking with a careful kind of boldness. They'd stayed late once working through a deadline. Nothing improper happened. No line was crossed. But there had been warmth. There had been something. A glance too long. A silence too meaningful. They had shared something human. And then within weeks, the audit crisis. Her name had come up. He had signed off, and she was gone. Now he knew she had never really left, at least not from the consequences. He closed the laptop gently like it might break under the weight of what he had just confirmed. Barron was her son, and if Charles was honest with himself, and it was time to be honest, there was a very real chance the boy was his son too. He stood up and walked slowly to the window. The city outside moved like it always did, ruthless, indifferent. But something inside him had shifted. This wasn't about regret anymore. It was about responsibility. He couldn't undo the past, but he could decide what kind of man he was going to be now. He had a name, he had an address, and he had a truth that was no longer avoidable. Tomorrow he would go to her. Tomorrow he would knock on her door, not as a businessman, not as a former boss, but as a man who might have a son, and finally wanted to know him. Charles had driven through that neighborhood before, though not in years, and certainly never with a purpose like this. It was the kind of place that whispered stories through its peeling paint and cracked sidewalks, not loudly, not seeking pity, but in the same quiet endurance he now recognized in her eyes. He found the address, a narrow brick complex nestled between a shuttered laundromat and a bodega with sun-faded signs. He parked across the street, sitting for a few moments behind the wheel, with the engine off, watching the curtains in the unit he believed to be hers shift slightly in the wind. It was late afternoon. The sun hung low, casting long shadows that reached across the street, like reminders of things left unresolved. He didn't rehearse what he'd say. He didn't have a speech. He only had a feeling, an ache, a question, and the faintest hope for an answer that would feel more like truth than permission. He crossed the street, heart heavier with every step, and climbed the chipped concrete stairs to the second floor. Apartment 2. B. The number on the door was faded, barely holding on to its glue. He hesitated before raising his hand, then knocked twice firm, then once softer, as if the door might understand the difference. For a moment, nothing. Then the sound of the chain sliding. The door opened halfway. She looked almost exactly the same. Her hair was pulled back looser now, a few strands escaping around her temples. Her expression was unreadable, her eyes alert but not surprised. It was as if she had known he would come one day, just not which day. She said nothing. Charles cleared his throat. "Alicia," he said. His voice was quieter than he'd meant. If you've come to apologize, do it from the hallway," she said, not moving. Charles nodded slowly, processing her tone, measured, not cruel, just precise. She didn't open the door any wider. She didn't step out. "I saw your son," he said, "at the park." That earned him a reaction. A flicker behind her eyes, then a soft, nearly imperceptible inhale. She didn't speak right away. Finally, she unlatched the door and opened it just wide enough to step aside. "You have 5 minutes," she said. "Then I want my evening back." The apartment was clean but worn. Everything had a purpose, nothing decorative without reason. The scent of something stewing in the kitchen lingered, spices, onions, something rich. The furniture was old but kept. Barron's books were stacked on a small table near the window. A school backpack leaned against the wall. The space was small but lived in. Charles took it in silently. Barron appeared from the back room a moment later, barefoot and holding a pencil. He stopped cold when he saw Charles. His eyes narrowed not with fear, but something closer to confusion and recognition. "You're the man from the park," Barron said. His voice was clear, measured for a boy his age. "Why are you here?" Charles felt his chest tighten. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Alicia turned toward her son. "Barron, go finish your assignment." The boy didn't move right away. "Is he in trouble?" he asked. "No," she said. "He's just late." That was enough. Barron gave Charles one last look, then turned and disappeared into the back again. The door clicked softly. Alicia gestured to the small table near the kitchen. "If you need to sit, sit. If not, speak." Charles sat slowly, hands on his knees. "I came because I didn't know," he said. "Not really. Not then. Not until yesterday." Alicia didn't sit. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes locked on him. "You mean you didn't remember me?" she said. "I remembered you," he replied. "I didn't remember everything. I didn't ask what I should have asked, and I didn't look when I should have looked." Alicia tilted her head, her mouth tight. "You didn't ask because you didn't have to," she said. "That's how it works, Charles. When someone like me makes a mistake or is accused of one, you don't ask questions. You just sign papers." Her voice wasn't raised, but it was sharp, clear, each word polished by years of holding back. "I went back through the records," Charles said. "I read your email. I read everything I should have read years ago." She looked down for the first time, not in shame, but as if weighing whether she had the energy to keep speaking. "Why now?" she asked quietly. "You think saying sorry makes up for silence." "No," he said. "I don't." She looked up again. "Then what are you here for? You want forgiveness, some absolution to help you sleep better at night." "No," he said again. "I want to know the truth, all of it, because Barron might be my son." The words hung in the air. No dramatic gasp, no shift in posture, just a silence that thickened by the second. Then softly, "He is." Charles nodded once, his throat tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" Alicia's eyes glinted. She pushed off the counter, taking a step toward him. "Because you didn't ask," she said. "Because you didn't look for me. Because after that night, you went back to your life, and I got told to pack my desk. And because I was pregnant and alone, and I decided that if the man who helped push me out couldn't bother to ask if I was okay, he didn't need to know I was carrying his child." Charles didn't respond. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't sound like a reason wrapped in an excuse. She was right. He hadn't asked. He hadn't looked. "I don't want anything from you," Alicia continued. "I don't need your money. I don't need your guilt. I raised him. I feed him. I keep the roof over our heads. He's smart, kind, and he knows who he is without needing your last name." "I believe you," Charles said quietly, "but he deserves the truth, and so do you. I'd like to be part of his life if you let me." She looked at him, not softening, but searching, as if trying to decide whether this man in front of her was different from the one who had once stayed silent. "You don't get to claim him," she said. "Not until you prove you're not just another man trying to rewrite his failures into a legacy." "I'm not asking you to believe me now," he said. "Just let me do the test. Let's start there." Alicia held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. "You want proof, fine. We'll get it. But don't come back here until you have something to show me. Not a speech, not a feeling. Something real." Charles stood steady. "Thank you." She walked him to the door, but didn't open it for him. He let himself out. As he walked down the stairs, the sun was beginning to dip behind the buildings. The shadows were longer now, but his steps were more certain. There was no resolution yet, no forgiveness, no reunion. but there was a door that hadn't slammed, and that, for now, was enough. Charles didn't sleep the night after the visit. He didn't even try. Instead, he sat in the corner of his bedroom, lights off, laptop closed, staring out the window at the city that kept moving, even when everything in him had come to a standstill. The words Alicia had spoken echoed not because they were harsh, but because they were true. You didn't ask. You didn't look. He thought of Baron's eyes. That question, why are you here? Not scared, just wary. Too aware for a child his age. The same awareness Charles remembered seeing in Alicia all those years ago, and now it lived in the boy too. He didn't know what he was to Baron yet. A stranger, an intruder maybe. But that question, who the boy was to him, needed an answer. Not for clarity's sake, not for closure, but because that boy had the right to know who he came from, who had abandoned the truth, and who maybe was ready to face it. By morning, Charles had already called a legal contact and arranged for an independent DNA test through a reputable clinic. Everything would be handled cleanly, transparently, with no ambiguity. Alicia responded to his message with just one line. "We'll come Thursday. Don't be late. No emotion, no opening. Just logistics." It was enough. At the clinic, Charles arrived early. He sat in the waiting room, hands clasped, stomach churning in a slow, quiet rhythm that reminded him of the first time he'd waited to hear if a business merger would go through. Except this felt much heavier. This wasn't about money or reputation. This was about blood, about truth, about showing up even if it was 10 years too late. Alicia walked in exactly on time. She didn't speak to him beyond what was necessary. Baron walked beside her, holding her hand. He didn't look at Charles. Not out of anger, just uncertainty. Charles didn't push, didn't wave, didn't smile. Just acknowledged the boy with a nod and sat still. The technician was polite and efficient. Swabs taken, forms signed. No unnecessary questions. It was clinical, brief. And when it was done, Alicia stood up, took Baron's hand again and said, "We'll wait for the results. Until then, don't come by." Charles nodded. He didn't argue. He just said, "Okay." The next few days passed like fog. He went to work, held meetings, signed approvals, but everything was background noise to the one question playing over and over in his head. What if it was true? And if it wasn't, why did it feel like it already was? He didn't wait for the results to start acting like something had shifted. The following Saturday, he took Jolie to the park, the same one where it all started. Baron was there again, sitting by himself, drawing something in a notebook. Alicia sat nearby on a bench, her eyes scanning the park, but never missing her son. Charles didn't approach. Instead, he sat across the field with Jolie letting her play, watching from a distance. When she noticed Baron, she ran over. No hesitation, no instruction, just instinct. "You remember me?" she asked cheerfully. Baron nodded, still quiet. "I brought crayons this time," she offered, holding out her hand. He hesitated, then took one. From where he sat, Charles watched as the two children sat side by side in the grass, sketching something only they could understand. Jolie would say something. Baron would nod, occasionally smile. Alicia didn't move from her bench. She didn't need to. The next day, Charles came back alone. Baron was there again. Charles sat a few feet away and opened a small brown paper bag. "I brought apple turnovers." "Still warm," he said without looking up. Baron didn't answer right away. Then slowly he walked over, took one, and sat a few feet away. They didn't speak for the first 10 minutes. Just sat, chewing, watching a group of kids play tag near the fence. "You ever play chess?" Charles asked eventually. Baron shrugged. "A little. I've got a board in the car. You want to try?" Baron didn't answer. But the next day, he came with his own board. Over the next few days, they played twice more. Never for long, never with pressure. Just two people sitting near each other, occasionally talking, mostly not. It wasn't much, but it was more than silence. And Charles never brought up the test, never said anything about blood or truth. Just let the minutes pass the way kids do softly, without agenda. Then came the envelope. It arrived at Charles's office sealed and plain. He didn't open it right away. He sat with it in his hand for a long time, his thumb brushing over the flap. Then he opened it, read it, and closed it again. Positive. Baron Lawrence, biological son of Charles Holmes. He sat in silence. He didn't cry, didn't smile, just breathed. It wasn't surprise. Not anymore. It was confirmation. And with confirmation came weight. That evening, he went back to the apartment. No call, no text. He knocked. Alicia opened the door, saw the envelope in his hand, and stepped aside. Inside, Baron was in the other room, his door slightly ajar. Charles didn't raise his voice. "I have the results," he said. Alicia took the paper, read it carefully, then folded it once and placed it on the table. Silence stretched. "I'm not here to claim anything," Charles said finally. "Not to fix what I broke. I want to do this right. Whatever that looks like." Alicia nodded once slowly. Then, for the first time, her voice softened. "He's a good kid," she said. "I can tell." She looked at him. "And he's mine. Always will be." "I know," Charles said. She didn't offer a seat, but she didn't ask him to leave either. And that quiet unsaid was a start. It started as a peaceful day. The kind of Saturday morning that had no intention of becoming anything more than an afternoon at the park. Charles had offered the idea gently, half expecting Alicia to decline. To his surprise, she didn't. She agreed with her usual short nod, no fuss, no warmth either. Just a quiet all right, as if to say, "Don't read into this." They met at the same park from a week ago, neutral ground, wide open spaces, enough distractions to avoid eye contact if needed. Charles had arrived early with Jolie bringing a picnic blanket, juice boxes, a worn frisbee, and a quiet hope that no one would storm off before noon. Alicia arrived on foot, with Barron trailing behind his sketchpad, tucked under his arm, eyes scanning for Jolie. She spotted him first, shouted his name with delight, and dashed across the grass like it was their private world. Alicia stayed a few paces behind sunglasses, on purse clutched like armor. Her shoulder had barely started to heal from the stress of the week, and her back bore the tension of someone who wasn't here to relax. She sat on a bench near the walkway while the children played. Charles stayed nearby, cautious, respectful. He didn't crowd her, didn't try to talk too much. Just kept one eye on the kids, one on her, not as a man courting forgiveness, but as a father trying not to mess this up. Barron wasn't speaking much. He mostly watched Jolie answering her questions in nods, occasionally smiling when she handed him things: a small plastic dino from her pocket, a purple ribbon for his wrist, a juice box he didn't ask for. She didn't notice his reserve. She was too busy being 5. It should have been an uneventful moment. Charles looked down to tie his shoe. Alicia pulled a bottle of water from her bag. Jolie let out a high-pitched squeal, not of fear, but excitement, and chased her red rubber ball that had bounced away during their make-believe game of pirate treasure. It rolled down the slight slope of the park and onto the paved path that looped around the parking lot. The ball didn't stop there. Jolie didn't either. Jolie Charles called out, standing quickly, his voice already shifting into alarm. But she was too fast, and the SUV was too close. The vehicle, a dark blue Escalade, was backing out slowly from a parking space. The driver, preoccupied with a phone on the passenger seat, wasn't looking straight back, just glancing at the rear view with one eye. Charles ran, but someone else was faster. Alicia dropped her water purse, falling to the ground, and tore across the path like she was born for it. She didn't yell, didn't scream. She just moved. Her sandals slapped the pavement, her arms pumping harder than her legs. Jolie was 3 feet from the car. Alicia reached her just in time to hook an arm around the girl's waist and spin, shielding her body with her own. The side mirror caught Alicia in the shoulder. The sound was sharp, hollow, a crack of bone, or maybe just force. Her body twisted midair, and she hit the pavement with a dull thud. Back first arm twisted awkwardly under her. Jolie bounced off and tumbled onto the grass nearby, screaming from shock rather than pain. The SUV slammed on the brakes. Charles dropped to his knees beside them. His mind had gone blank except for one word: please. Please be okay. Please move. Please don't close your eyes. Jolie was curled up on her knees beside Alicia's head, sobbing. "I'm sorry, Mom. Alicia, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't know. Please don't be hurt." Alicia's face was tight with pain, but her good hand reached up and found Jolie's curls, smoothing them gently. "It's okay, baby. You're safe. You're okay," she whispered, voice barely above a breath. Charles hovered beside her, his eyes wild, breath shallow. "Don't move," he said to Alicia, one hand behind her neck, the other fumbling for his phone. "You saved her, God. You saved her." Barron stood nearby, eyes fixed on the scene like it wasn't real. His hands were balled into fists, knuckles, white lips trembling. He hadn't moved from where he was sitting. But his eyes, they were on his mother, like she was the only thing holding the world together. The driver of the SUV had stepped out, pale, shaking, apologizing. "I didn't see her. I swear I didn't." Charles waved him off without speaking. The ambulance sirens were already approaching. The ride to the hospital felt longer than it was. Charles sat between Jolie and Alicia in the back of the emergency vehicle. He didn't let go of either of them. Jolie had stopped crying, but she refused to let go of Alicia's good hand. Charles squeezed her other shoulder gently, murmuring small reassurances, trying to convince himself, as much as the others, that it wasn't worse. In the ER, doctors moved with efficient concern. X-rays, ice packs, painkillers. Alicia winced through all of it but never cried out. Charles answered most of the questions. Jolie sat in his lap now, drawing shapes on a napkin with a pen a nurse had given her. Every few seconds, she'd look up toward Alicia on the gurney to make sure she hadn't disappeared. Baron stood in the doorway, rigid, his face unreadable. He stared at his mother the whole time as if memorizing every breath. She's going to be okay, Charles finally told him. Baron didn't respond right away. Then he said softly, "She always is." Later, when the chaos calmed and the room was still, Charles returned to Alicia's side. She lay on her back arm in a sling, head propped slightly, staring at the ceiling. "You didn't have to." Yes, she cut him off. He stopped. "I didn't think. I just moved. That's what mothers do." He nodded. "And she called you Mom," he said. Alicia's eyes closed for a moment, then opened again. "I heard." Jolie padded into the room, then holding a crumpled napkin. "I made us," she said proudly, handing it to Alicia. The drawing was rough stick figures, smiling faces, but unmistakable. 4 people holding hands under a sun. Names scribbled in block letters: Daddy Charles, Mommy Alicia, Jolie, Baron. Alicia took the drawing with her good hand. Her eyes welled, just for a moment. Baron stepped inside, slow, hesitant. His voice was quiet. "Can I sit next to you?" Alicia smiled gently. "You always can." Charles stood in the corner, silent, for once not needing to speak, just standing in the middle of something that was becoming real and worth saving. The idea came casually, but the moment felt anything but. It was the first time Charles had invited her really into his home, not for some grand gesture or apology, but for something as human and humble as dinner. He hadn't planned the words. They just left his mouth while standing in the hallway of her building, 2 grocery bags in hand, Jolie humming on the floor nearby with crayons, Baron on the couch reading in silence. "I was thinking, if you're up for it, I'd really love to have you all over. Just a meal. Nothing complicated." Alicia looked at him, then down at her arm, still in a sling, shoulder stiff and bruised from the accident. "I can't really cook with one hand, Charles. I wasn't going to ask you to," he said quickly. "I just thought we could all be in the same room. Maybe I could order something or—" "Try not to ruin spaghetti." She raised an eyebrow. "Order something and feed Gumbo to a microwave." He tried a small smile. "Fair point." She paused, clearly turning something over in her mind. Then, to his quiet surprise, she said, "If I'm going to show up in someone else's house, it's not going to be empty-handed. I'll cook, but I'll need help. And I don't mean hovering in the doorway asking if I need water help. I mean chopping, lifting, stirring, shutting up, and listening help." Charles nodded, hands slightly raised. "Yes, ma'am." She turned back inside without another word. The door closed gently, but not coldly. That was her yes. And when they arrived later that evening, Baron held the pot of raw shrimp, and Jolie had a box of jasmine rice hugged to her chest like a prize. Alicia carried nothing except herself, her purse slung across her good shoulder, her eyes scanning the penthouse with wary curiosity. The space gleamed with understated wealth, high ceilings, neutral tones, thick curtains, a kitchen that looked more photographed than used. Still, she didn't flinch. She walked in like someone who knew her presence didn't require apology. Charles gestured toward the kitchen. "Everything's cleaned and cleared. Counter space is yours. I'll need a cutting board, big pot, butter, and patience." "I've got 3 of those," he quipped. "We'll figure out the butter." The first test came fast. Alicia reached to open a cabinet with her good arm, then stopped short. The strain pulled at her shoulder and made her inhale through clenched teeth. Charles noticed, but didn't say anything. He just stepped beside her, opened the door, and stepped back. "Thanks," she said without eye contact. They settled into an unusual rhythm. Alicia gave clear instructions. Charles fetched and chopped. Baron helped peel the shrimp with practiced hands, his face calm but focused. Jolie darted in and out like a happy bee, occasionally asking to stir something or pass an onion. Alicia let her sprinkle seasoning into the pot, watching her with both amusement and caution. "That's enough cayenne," she said once gently but firm. Jolie giggled. "Oops." The gumbo started to come alive slowly. Onions, peppers, celery, butter, flour stock. The roux darkened carefully, and Alicia stood over the pot like a conductor guiding Charles's every movement with a grace that didn't need two arms to command a kitchen. When he stirred too fast, she corrected him. When he salted too soon, she gave him a look. But it wasn't annoyance. It was familiarity. They were building something stir by stir. At one point, she stepped back to rest her breath, catching slightly. Charles noticed. "Do you want to sit?" "I'm not fragile, Charles." "I know," he said quietly, "but you don't have to do everything tonight." "I'm not doing everything. I'm just doing enough to remind myself I still can." Barron looked up then, as if hearing something deeper in her words. He didn't say anything, but he walked over, took the ladle from her hand, and stirred the gumbo slowly. "I got it, Ma," he said. She looked at him, eyes softening. "I know you do." Dinner was served just as the sun began to dip beyond the tall windows. The city outside glowed gold, but inside the light was warm and low. They sat at the round oak table, Charles, Alicia Barron, and Jolie, each with a bowl in front of them, steam rising like a silent welcome. Jolie slurped a spoonful immediately and let out an exaggerated gasp. "This is better than pizza." Barron tried his, nodded slowly, and gave a quiet approving ma'am. Charles tasted last. He closed his eyes for a second as the flavor hit him, layers of depth heat comfort. He looked at Alicia. "This is the best thing I've eaten in my life." "Don't lie," she replied. "I'm not," he said, serious now. "It tastes like you meant it." She paused, then gave him the smallest of smiles. "That's the only way I cook." Jolie reached across the table, dropping a crayon-colored napkin beside Alicia's bowl. "I made us again," she said. The drawing had changed this time. They were holding hands under a gumbo pot shaped like the sun. Charles stood, picked up the pitcher, and refilled everyone's glass. Then he paused, took a breath, and refilled Alicia's glass, last not out of oversight, but intention. When he set it down in front of her, their eyes met. She didn't thank him, but she didn't need to. Barron glanced around the table as if taking inventory. His shoulders seemed to relax for the first time all week. He reached for a slice of bread, broke it in half, and handed one piece to Jolie. Alicia watched the quiet exchange, then leaned back slightly. Her body hurt, but something in her chest was lighter. Charles cleared his throat. "I never did this before. I mean, sit down and eat like this, with people I care about. Not because I was avoiding it, I just never made space for it." "Well," Alicia said, "there's space now." And there was. In the clinking of cutlery and the low jazz playing in the background, in the way Jolie leaned her head on Barron's shoulder, and he didn't shake her off, in the way Charles waited for everyone to finish before standing to clear a plate. No grand declarations were made. No one labeled what they were becoming. But it was clear this was more than a meal. It was a table being rebuilt, with one hand in a sling, one hand offering help, and 4 seats filled by choice. Alicia said nothing when Charles helped her with her coat later. She didn't pull away. Outside, when Barron looked up at the stars, he said simply, "That felt like a family." Charles turned to him quiet. "It is." For once, no one disagreed. The next morning, everything changed. Not in the way anyone expected, not with a shout or a knock at the door, but with a buzz on Charles's phone at 6:47 a.m. He was in the kitchen, alone, rinsing out Jolie's water bottle, when the screen lit up with a text from one of the junior partners at the firm. "You might want to see this. Page 6. This one's going wide." His heart didn't race, not right away. But there was a pause, a mental bracing before he opened the link. A grainy long-lens photograph filled the screen, him and Barron standing outside a pharmacy, the boy looking up as Charles held a paper bag and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. The headline above it, in bold white Wall Street's Family Man Home's hidden son comes to light. And then, in smaller font, billionaire CEO's private life raises eyebrows on Park Avenue. Charles stared at the photo. The bag in his hand was full of gauze and painkillers for Alicia's shoulder. They'd gone to the drugstore after dinner while Jolie napped. It had been uneventful, quiet, a moment of ordinary kindness. But now it was page 1 on gossip blogs. He looked down the hall toward the bedrooms. Everyone was still asleep, for now. By 9 a.m., his phone was buzzing nonstop. Emails, voicemails. A board member called directly. "We're fielding questions from media consultants. Can we get a statement?" Charles didn't answer. He stood at the kitchen window instead, watching the street below. His world had shifted again, but the traffic still moved like nothing had happened. By noon, it was everywhere. Financial news networks, gossip columns, social media posts. Some comments were supportive. Many weren't. Typical. Another do-gooder with a PR stunt. "He's gone woke." Great. That poor kid used for image. Jolie saw it first. She came into the living room holding a tablet. Daddy, someone at school said you're famous now. Charles looked up. Why would they say that? She showed him the screen, his face, Baron's Elysia in the background, captured and cut into a meme. The caption, "The Modern American Family," sponsored by Guilt. Baron walked in behind her, saw the image, and froze. He didn't speak. His eyes moved from the screen to Charles, then to Jolie, then down to the carpet. Charles took the tablet, turned it over, and set it face down on the coffee table. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "This wasn't supposed to happen this way." Elysia appeared in the doorway, arm still in a sling wrapped in a gray cardigan. "It never is," she said flatly. "People don't need a reason to feel entitled to our lives. They just take the pieces they want." There was a long silence. Baron moved to the couch and sat down, hugging his knees. Jolie climbed beside him and rested her head on his arm. She didn't say anything, but she didn't move away either. That evening, things got worse. Charles received an intercom call from the building concierge. "Mr. Holmes, we've had a few residents express concerns about the new living arrangements." He was stunned. "Concerns?" "Yes, sir. Someone reported increased noise, unusual guests, possible disturbances. None confirmed, of course, but we're obligated to document it." Charles pressed his lips together. "Who called? I'm not at liberty to say." He hung up before anger could make him say something reckless. That night, after dinner, the landline rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but he picked up anyway. "Mr. Holmes," a woman's voice said, "some of us bought into this floor expecting a certain level of consistency. Who is this?" He asked, his voice calm but cold. "We're just asking that you consider the broader image here. This is a community." He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He simply said, "You want consistency. Here's mine. I don't abandon my family." He hung up. The next morning, a crisis meeting was called at the firm. Charles sat at the head of a long glass table surrounded by executives and legal counsel. A few looked away when he entered. Others offered forced smiles. One board member cleared her throat. "We've seen a 20% spike in online chatter. Some of it is sympathetic, but our client confidence index has dropped." Charles listened. He didn't interrupt. A younger partner chimed in. "Your personal choices are yours, of course, but in this climate, identity narratives get politicized quickly. We need to clarify your stance." He leaned forward. "Clarify, yes. What's the message, Charles, is this? A family matter, a philanthropic pivot, a personal mistake." Charles exhaled, slowly, firmly. "I spent most of my life avoiding anything that looked like family. Now I have one. I won't apologize for that." One of the older board members sighed. "We're not asking you to apologize. We're asking if this will affect your leadership." He looked around the room, all of them staring. "Being a father doesn't make me less of a leader," he said. "But if this firm believes I have to choose between protecting a child and protecting our portfolio, then maybe I need to stop being CEO before I stop being a father." Silence. Heavy, quiet, pin-drop silence. No one challenged him after that. Later that evening, Charles returned home. He opened the door and was greeted by the smell of vanilla and something sweet. Jolie was icing cupcakes. Baron was helping by lining muffin trays. Elysia stood nearby watching them, with one arm across her chest, the other in a sling. She looked tired but peaceful. "You're home early," she said. "I walked out of a meeting," he replied. "Why?" "Because they asked me what I stood for. And I told them." She watched him carefully, reading between the lines. "And I think they understood. Or at least they heard me." She gave a slow nod, then said nothing else. Jolie looked up from her cupcake and grinned. "We're making Chocolate Baron's favorite." Baron shrugged. "I didn't say favorite. I said it's good." Charles walked over and picked up a spoon. "Then let's make it great." 2 days later, the air had begun to settle around them, but the echoes hadn't completely faded. At breakfast that morning, Baron had been unusually quiet, stirring his cereal until it turned soggy. Jolie had tried to cheer him up by sticking raisins onto her pancakes to make a smiling face, but he'd barely lifted his eyes. Elysia noticed, but didn't push. She simply packed his lunch more carefully than usual, slipping in a note written with her non-dominant hand. "You are enough always." Charles, meanwhile, had been half listening to another radio segment dissecting his family controversy, only switching it off when Jolie came in humming. Later that afternoon, Baron stood just outside the school's metal gate, holding Jolie's pink unicorn backpack in one hand while she bounded out of the front doors. Her cheeks were flushed from play, her hair wild and loose. She ran up to him with a smile like nothing in the world could be wrong. "Guess what? We got stickers for listening." she said proudly, "but I gave mine to Avery because hers fell in the toilet. That's fair, right?" "Yeah," Barron said softly, adjusting the backpack strap. "That's fair." They started walking down the sidewalk together. It was one of those quiet, in-between days where the season wasn't sure if it wanted to be winter or spring. The sky was cloudy, but the wind was warm. Jolie skipped a little, letting her fingers brush the hedges along the street. Then it happened. A group of 3 boys around Jolie's age, kids from the same class, maybe a grade older, were kicking a soccer ball in the side yard of a brownstone. As Jolie and Barron passed, the ball rolled toward them. Barron reached down and kicked it gently back, just as one of the boys shouted, "Hey, thanks." "Wait, Jolie, is that your driver?" Jolie blinked. "What, that guy?" The tallest boy pointed at. Barron then laughed. "Your dad hired him or something." "No," she answered, confused. "Oh, so he's your brother," another boy said, cocking his head and smirking. "But you're white." "Yeah," said the third. "You're like super white." "And he's not." Barron froze mid-step, his shoulders visibly stiffening. Jolie stepped in front of him. "He is my brother," she said, voice louder this time. "And so what if we're different colors?" One of the boys snorted. "He looks like chocolate and you look like milk. That's messed up." Jolie's eyes flared, her face turning a shade of red only a child gets when she feels something big and unfair and doesn't have a grown-up word for it. She took a single step closer and pointed right at them. "His skin is chocolate," she snapped, "and yours is the color of cement. Ugly, boring cement." The boys laughed, surprised. "Cement?" "Yeah," she said fiercely. "Cement cracks. Chocolate doesn't. So who's better now?" She grabbed Barron's hand and pulled him away. Barron didn't say a word at first. They walked a block in silence, the kind of silence that crackled with things neither of them knew how to explain. His fingers were slightly trembling in hers, and she held on tighter. After another minute, she looked up at him. "I don't like when people talk like that." He nodded. "Me neither. They're stupid. They're just repeating what they hear," Barron said, voice quiet. "From someone. They should stop." "I know." They walked another block. Then Barron spoke again, softer than before. "Why'd you do that? Say what you said. You didn't have to." Jolie looked up at him like he had just asked the most ridiculous thing in the world. "Because it's true, and I'm not letting anyone be mean to you. That's what sisters do." Barron's lips twitched. Just a little. Not quite a smile, but something close. He looked straight ahead, blinking faster than usual. "Thanks," he whispered. From a car parked across the street, Charles sat still behind the wheel. He hadn't meant to follow them exactly, but after the week they'd had, and the media still circling like vultures, he didn't want Barron to feel exposed. So he parked discreetly, just in case. He saw the whole thing. Every insult, every retort, every ounce of courage packed into that tiny girl in a glitter-covered jacket. He hadn't intervened. He hadn't needed to. Watching Jolie pull Barron away, fingers laced tightly, he felt something deep and sharp twist in his chest. It wasn't just pride. It was humility, awe, that someone so small could know so instinctively what was right and act on it without hesitation. While so many adults danced around discomfort, she had cut through it with a single line. Cement cracks. Chocolate doesn't. That night at dinner, they didn't talk about it directly. Charles didn't want to make it bigger than it already was, but he did reach over during dessert and quietly placed a small napkin-wrapped bundle beside Barron's plate. "What's this?" Barron asked, unwrapping it. Inside was a folded pin, an old worn copper chess piece, a knight the base polished smooth by time. "My grandfather gave me that when I was 10, Charles said. Said it was for when I did something brave. I think you earned it today." Barron stared at the piece. Then he looked up, his expression unreadable. "I didn't do anything he said." "You didn't walk away," Charles replied. "You let her stand beside you." Jolie leaned across the table, and I won. Alicia, sitting with one arm still cradled in a sling, smiled gently and reached for Jolie's hand. "Yes, sweetie, you did." The next morning, Charles found Barron sitting by the window, holding the knight in his palm. Not playing with it, just holding it, like it meant something he wasn't quite ready to say. But he would. In time. The sun was starting to dip below the trees, casting long shadows across the backyard and bathing the garden in a soft amber hue. It was one of those evenings where the light lingers a little longer, as if it doesn't want to say goodbye just yet. Jolie was sprawled across a blanket on the grass, her markers scattered around her like small explosions of color. Baron sat next to her calm as ever, carefully helping her outline the trunk of a tree in one of her many drawings. 4 stick figures stood under that tree. One of them was wearing glasses, one had curls like his, one had a bandage on her arm, and the last had a balloon in her hand. Alicia sat on the porch steps, a light shawl over her shoulders, her injured arm still in a soft sling. Her eyes followed her children, yes, both of them now, and she exhaled in a way that sounded like release, like something had been lodged in her chest for years and was finally softening. It had been a long day, a long week, a long decade, but this evening felt different. It felt steady. Charles stepped out of the house, his usual business gait slower, now more grounded. He carried a small wooden box in his hand, the kind you don't bring out unless something inside it matters. He didn't say anything at first, just stood near the edge of the porch, watching Alicia as she watched their children. Then he took a slow breath and sat beside her, holding the box in his lap, like it might disappear if he let go. "I had this made," he said, voice quiet. "Didn't really know if it was the right time. But then again, I don't think there's ever a perfect time. There's only now." Alicia turned toward him. Her expression was unreadable at first, still guarded, still protective of the heart that had been mishandled one too many times. But she didn't pull away. Charles opened the box. Inside was a silver ring, simple and smooth. No diamonds, no fanfare, just 4 names engraved in a circle as if they had always been meant to stand together. Alicia, Baron, Jolie, Charles. "I'm not asking you for anything you're not ready to give," he said softly. "I'm not rushing you. I'm not trying to fix what I broke with one gesture. I want you to know I see this. I see you. I see them. And I want to be part of it. Every day. Not because I have to. Because I want to." Alicia blinked slowly. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but instead she looked down at the ring, then back at him. There was no dramatic music, no cinematic swelling of strings. Just the sound of the wind brushing past the fence and the kids laughing in the yard. "May I?" she asked. He nodded. She picked up the ring and slid it onto the middle finger of her right hand. It wasn't tradition, but it was hers. The band fit perfectly, like it had been waiting. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice barely louder than the breeze. "I know," he said, "but I needed to." Their eyes held for a beat too long, and for once, neither of them looked away. Then, like clockwork, Jolie's voice sliced through the calm. "Wait, was that a proposal? Did I miss the kiss part?" Baron groaned. Nobody kissed Jolie, but he gave her a ring, she declared, running over with the picture she'd just finished. "Look, I even drew it before it happened. See, we're a family under a big tree, and the balloon means it's a celebration." Alicia looked at the drawing, her eyes glassy now. "That's beautiful, baby," she said. Charles smiled, taking in the scene, Jolie beaming, Baron grinning despite himself, and Alicia finally allowing herself to breathe in the moment. So Jolie said, hands on her hips, "Are we getting married or not?" Charles leaned forward and ruffled her hair gently. "Sweetheart," he said, "what we're doing right now, being here, being together, that's the most important kind of promise there is. But weddings have cake," Jolie replied. Everyone laughed, even Alicia. "Maybe someday," she said, glancing at Charles with the hint of something new in her gaze. "Trust maybe, or something on its way there." Baron chimed in. "As long as I don't have to wear a suit." "You will," Charles said. "Nope, I'll bribe you with chess sets." Baron considered. "Fine, but custom pieces." "Done." Jolie twirled in a circle, delighted. "Then I'll get to be the flower girl, and Mama can wear a long, pretty dress." And Jolie Alicia cut in, not scolding, just smiling. "Breathe, sweetheart." The light faded a little more, and the family sat together on the porch steps, sharing silence that didn't feel heavy anymore, just full. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Alicia stood by the window in Charles's apartment. The city looked softer from this high up, less frantic, less indifferent. The ring caught the light from the kitchen, a small glint on her finger. She turned it slowly with her thumb. Charles approached quietly. "You okay?" She nodded. "Tired, but yeah. Okay." He stood beside her, not touching her, just close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "Jolie's got your spirit," she said. "Baron's got your strength." They didn't say anything for a while. Then, almost in a whisper, she added, "Maybe I was scared that if I let you stay, it would mean I'd have to forgive everything." "You don't," Charles said. "You don't owe me forgiveness." "You don't owe me anything." I just want the chance to be here, to earn it. Every day. She looked at him, her eyes no longer guarded. Well, she said, turning back to the window, you've got tomorrow. And the day after that, he replied, and together they stood in the quiet of that room, the hum of the city below them, and a future still uncertain, but this time not unwelcome, not perfect, not wrapped up, but real. And for them tonight, that was more than enough. The sky was an immaculate stretch of pale blue, not a single cloud in sight. The breeze that swept across the gardens of West Elm Estate carried the scent of blooming jasmine and peony, the kind of scent that lingered just long enough to remind everyone that something new was beginning. Rows of white chairs lined the stone path, their satin bows fluttering lightly in the wind. Beyond them, a grand floral arch stood draped in ivory and gold, standing tall against a backdrop of trimmed hedges and swaying birch trees. Guests had begun arriving nearly an hour early. Some came curious, some came supportive, a few unsure, but they came nonetheless. Most had never seen Charles Holmes in anything but tailored suits behind closed boardroom doors. Now he stood beneath the archway, his tuxedo elegant but not imposing, his hair neatly combed back, a single white rose pinned to his lapel. He kept glancing at his cufflink, then up the aisle, then back again like a man caught between disbelief and anticipation. Barron was already there, his hands tucked nervously into the pockets of his miniature tux hair, carefully combed, looking every bit like a young man far too serious for his age. He kept checking the velvet box in his pocket, just to be sure the rings hadn't gone anywhere. Jolie stood a few feet ahead of him, a crown of tiny roses on her head and a basket of petals swinging in her hands. Her dress shimmered with a soft champagne hue, and she grinned at everyone who passed like she owned the day. Then came the music. A gentle string quartet began to play, and the crowd turned. Down the aisle walked Alicia Lawrence, arm hooked gently through the elbow of an old friend from the neighborhood, who now smiled with tears in his eyes. Her dress was a stunning sheath of satin and lace, fitted but flowing with pearl buttons trailing down her back, and a veil held gently in place by a comb she said belonged to her grandmother. Her injury from months before had long since healed, but the grace in her walk carried more strength than any sling ever could. Charles could barely breathe. The moment Alicia reached the front, Barron stepped forward, opening the box with just the right amount of gravity for a boy of 9 trying to be a gentleman. Charles took her hand firmly, reverently, and then turned toward the small group seated before them. I was once told that you should never mix business with your personal life. Charles began a nervous half-smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. But if I'd stayed behind that desk, I would have missed the best thing that ever happened to me twice. He turned to Alicia. I made a mistake letting you go. I didn't ask. I didn't listen. But I'm here now, and I'm not walking away again. I may not have all the right words, but I have all the right intentions. And I promise you no more silence, no more distance, only presence. And this promise, I will show up. Every single day. Alicia's eyes had begun to shimmer, and she bit her lower lip, but didn't look away. You didn't save me, Charles, she replied, her voice steady but thick with emotion. You showed up. That's what saved us. A hush settled as they exchanged rings. The officiant didn't have to say much more. The kiss was tender but sure, and Jolie squealed with delight as petals flew around them. The reception was held in the same garden, now transformed into a canopy of light. Lanterns swung from tree branches. The food was a blend of southern comfort and coastal elegance, gumbo and crab cakes, sweet tea, and champagne. Barron snuck a cupcake before dinner. Jolie made 3 new friends before the speeches even started. Alicia danced with her new husband beneath the fairy lights, her laughter freer than anyone had heard in years. At one point during the evening, Charles stepped away for a moment just to look at them. Barron talking animatedly with a few of his classmates, Jolie dragging Alicia onto the dance floor again, her tiny hands pulling at the hem of her mother's dress, and for once the world felt still. There was no corporate board, no scandal, no whisper, just air and joy and presence. The next morning, life resumed. The 2 children stood outside their new school backpacks, secured lunchboxes in hand. Jolie adjusted Barron's collar like she'd seen her mom do before. Barron, in turn, helped her zip her bag. Their hands found each other as they crossed the parking lot, a subtle pact stronger than most signatures. I'll see you at lunch, wedding brother, she whispered, and Barron grinned. Inside the classroom, when asked to draw their family, Jolie sketched 4 people standing beneath a massive tree, all smiling. She handed it to the teacher without hesitation. Underneath, she wrote in pink crayon, crooked but proud, "This is my family. We don't all match, but we belong." And sometimes belonging was the most beautiful thing of all. Thank you, truly, for staying with us through this soul-stirring journey. From the very first moment a little girl screamed, "Daddy, that's my brother," to the day this unexpected family stood hand in hand under wedding lights. This wasn't just a story. It was a reflection of something deeper, the power of truth, the courage to choose love, and the quiet strength it takes to show up, even when it's hard. Maybe you're watching this from a quiet kitchen table or a worn armchair by the window. Maybe you're someone who has lived through injustice. Or maybe you're simply someone who believes we can do better. Wherever you are in the world, thank you for listening with your heart. We tell these emotional stories because they matter, because there's something healing in watching broken things come back together, because heartwarming love stories like this remind us that family isn't always blood. It's who stays, who stands up, who says, "I'm here, and I won't walk away again." If this story moved you even just a little, let us know. Leave a like or a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. What touched you most? Was it Baron's silent courage, Jolie's fearless heart, Alicia's quiet resilience, or the moment the millionaire finally collapsed in tears and rose again, not richer, but whole? And if you'd like to see more touching stories like this, more moments that pull us closer to our better selves, consider subscribing. Your support helps bring these heartwarming stories to life and keeps this channel growing strong. Until next time, take care of your heart and those around you. We'll be back with another story soon. One that we hope will stir your soul just as much. See you in the next one.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.